Okay.
And we're recording. And hi, everyone, and welcome again to my audiovisual channel. My name is Gabriela Handal. I'm a draftsman and your host for this podcast, A Conversation About Art. With these conversations, I'm doing long term research on the meaning of art and beauty through conversations with colleagues in different artistic fields. Today, I bring you episode 115 with artist David Simon. If you enjoy this video, please like and share all the videos and subscribe because these actions are very helpful. You can help even further by checking out the links in the video description. So, David, welcome to A Conversation About Art. You are episode 115. Please tell our listeners and viewers who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Gabrielle. My name is David Simon. I am a sculptor, and I have been making sculpture for about 30 years.
Mm-hmm. That's a long time.
Yes, thanks for reminding me.
Well, I don't know. A 30-year-old person is not considered old or anything, so there's that.
No, I didn't start in the womb. I started when I was in my early 20s.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, out of the available mediums of
hmm
painting, drawing, photography, arguably, um,
hmm
why did you choose sculpture?
Um, I think I had always really wanted to be a painter, but I'm completely colorblind. And so, that I talk to people and they think like, oh, or they express the idea that that might be really interesting to see somebody who doesn't see color at all paint. Um, but from my perspective, um, it was, it was something I just like when you can't see something, it's very difficult to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it would be interesting for other people to see what kind of awful results I would come up with
Mm-hmm.
in that scenario. But for me, I was very, especially when I was younger, I was very interested in sort of figuring out how to control a media and make it do what I wanted it to do. And if I couldn't see, I would argue like what, maybe 60% of now that I've been an artist for a long time and I work with a lot of painters, I realize there are a lot of elements beyond color that go into painting. But
Right.
as a, 20, 21, 22-year old, it seemed to me like 80% was color. Now I would say maybe 50% is color, but that's still a pretty significant chunk that I didn't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, looking around, I did do quite a lot of drawing, but I kind of gravitated toward sculpture as both something I felt like I was developing at the time a certain capacity for, and then also because I sort of began to develop the idea or the feeling that it was something that all of the other visual arts sort of um, not aspire to. That's a little bit strong, but sort of all representational drawing and painting is an attempt to evoke the third dimension. And
Right.
in sculpture, like you're sort of explicitly working in that. So that was sort of appealing. And then there were a lot of things that I felt like and still feel like I lack. Like I don't have the ability to create an entire environment unless I want to move into the field of diorama, where I built a little shoebox and I, put a backdrop and characters and all of these other elements in it. And that's, a very, very, I wouldn't, you know, to the extent that anything is easy in art, that's fairly easy in painting. You design the space that you want to, and then you evoke it with drawing and paint. And when you're dealing with sculpture, you tend to be isolated to individual elements, a single head or a single figure or part of a body, or, um, obviously you can become more ambitious and get into architectural installation and create entire spaces, but it's not something that you can do with the same casualness that you can in a painting. You know, for $100 worth of materials, you can create a universe in a painting, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just not really feasible in sculpture. So that's a very kind of long, slow-winded, long-winded way of saying that I came to sculpture partially through necessity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, so would you explain color blindness to me, please? Is it like that, like the person can't see red and green, or you just don't see any color at all? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, color is very subjective, and I've done like a reasonable amount of research, the kind of research you might do when you get a stomach ache and you Google like stomach aches, what causes it, what are
Mm-hmm.
the cures, I haven't delved like really deeply into all of the scientific background, but I'm much more than red green colorblind. Red green is the most common type of color blindness.
Mm-hmm.
From a relative point of view, the question is always like, what is color, and do people experience it the same way? Like,
Mm-hmm.
when you say blue, does somebody else who sees color see blue the same way? I know that I don't see the difference between almost any color. So the way that it works most clearly for me is, to explain, is that it would be like watching a black and white TV, where you have like all the shades of gray, and you can see darker and lighter and all those nuances, but no temperature difference at all.
Mm-hmm.
No warm and cool, no blue or red, no green or purple, none of those distinctions. Um, on some level, I may be seeing everything in shades of blue, but if all you saw were shades of blue, that would not be like, you wouldn't see reds or greens or anything else. So there's no way for me to like know if I'm seeing everything in shades of one single color, if I just don't have the ability to distinguish any colors. But um, growing up, I could always tell you what colors were in a black and white photo or black and white TV, because I always people would point to dark colors and say like, oh, that's blue and that's red and that's purple, and they'd point to light colors and say that's yellow and that's green, and so I began to associate like tonality with color. So I will get completely confused if you show me light blue, and I'll think it's yellow because it's a light color.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you show me like a very dark yellow, I might think it's red or blue or purple, because those are the colors I associate with being dark.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I mean, whenever you were diagnosed with being colorblind, wasn't the whoever diagnosed you able to kind of determine what part of the spectrum you're able to see, or if you're able? Because I mean, I'm not entirely sure whether color is necessarily subjective, because I mean the spectrum of light is, it's pretty clear what part of the spectrum we can see. So it's like somebody might be able to. It's like when you're talking about the color blue, somebody might be like, yeah, that's like a cobalt blue, and I would be like, yeah, but it kind of looks purple to me, but it's still kind of within the same vicinity of one area of color at least. So what is arguably subjectivity is pretty subjective, is really quite narrow. Like, it's still similar, so then the person whomever diagnosed you when you were, whenever it was, with color blindness, like how were they, what did they determine in terms of what you can see or what you can't see?
They basically determined that I was not able to see almost any color.
I see.
Like, essentially what they show you is a circle with a lot of dots in it, and the dots each have a different color
Mm,
to them. And when you look at one of these circles, you're supposed to be able to see, a number or a letter.
right.
Um, and in all of them, I couldn't see anything but dots.
I see. Okay.
So, I know like there are rods and cones, and like I don't know that I was ever tested like physically for missing one of those. I don't know how they would test that. I think what they test is very similar to like a hearing test. They don't go into your ear and see if you have all the bones that
Right.
are necessary to hear. They like give you a tone, and if you can't see it, they say like, okay, you're hard of hearing.
Okay.
Um, so it would be super interesting to know if I like genetically am lacking some receptor that allows me to see color, or if I just have a suppressed ability like in my brain to distinguish them. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't really know whether like a physical, I mean, I would assume both of those are physical to a certain extent, but I don't know why I can't. I just know um, that my mother didn't tell me we had a black and white TV until I was like 15. I assumed we had a color TV. Um,
Okay. Okay, so all right, but in that case, um, I guess it still makes me curious about why you ended up sticking because, when you're drawing,
mhm,
if you're drawing with graphite or charcoal, then color is irrelevant basically.
sure.
So in that case, because and I mean the reason when I have talked to sculptors occasionally for my podcast, um,
Mhm,
and the reason for which I am curious about choosing sculpture as a medium is because sculpture takes up so much space. It is so
mhm.
dirty. It is so difficult. It is so difficult to sell. And I mean, not dirty, because I mean, I have no problem getting stuff on my hands. I just mean like the area in which you're working just gets covered
Uh-huh.
with stuff. It doesn't matter if it's the oil clay, it doesn't matter if it's water based, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's always going to get, everything around you is going to get covered in the debris of the medium that you're using. So then there's like, like
Yeah,
arguably things that are in the way of, I don't know, making
yeah,
sculpture easier. So like
yeah. So
having,
you're really selling it.
I mean, I'm just, painting has lots of drawbacks for me as well.
Yeah.
And drawing arguably has more drawbacks than painting because like people don't respect drawings. People respect
Hmm.
paintings, for
Yeah.
example. And that's like a kind of like a collective unconscious type thing, and I mean, I'm
Hmm.
aware that drawings compared to paintings are very vulnerable because we were only like in the Renaissance. I think that's when we started just like being able to experiment with fixing drawings, with like spray fixative
Hmm.
and stuff, like that sort of fixing. Um, so, I mean, painting was already an established sort of thing at the time, and it's like we have. Anyway, the thing is that each medium has its own encumbrances. So then why did you, like, why, in spite of the encumbrances that come with sculpture, why did you choose it anyway? Aside from the issue with color, which is, valid and everything, of course.
Um, well, I mean, uh, I think that in life, and it's probably a positive thing because if it weren't this way, I think a lot of things in the world would never get done. I think that we choose the path that we're going to go on when we're blissfully naive of all of the practical roadblocks that those are going to like throw up in our life. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
began sculpting when I was 20, and I wasn't thinking about how difficult it was and or how much space I would need or um, how expensive it might get or um, how heavy it was. I didn't like those never entered my mind. Like what entered my mind was how much fun it was,
Right.
how exciting it was to sort of see it evolve in front of me. Um, and having taught over, the last, 20 some odd years, I see that replay all the time. I see
Right.
people who sort of don't take into account all the practical issues that you run into. Um, and to a certain extent, is it my responsibility to point those out, like you just did for me about how many drawbacks there are to the career that I chose? Like maybe, but maybe not. Maybe what you want is people who go in really enthusiastically into something and respond to those difficulties in creative ways that not only affect their lives and their like how clean they are and how many times they need to shower a day,
Mm-hmm.
but also what art making looks like. Um, I think that painters I know are. their process is a response to the developments that have been made in materials, and some of that is in relation to how difficult or easy it is to make a painting. Things like alkyd mediums that make paints dry quicker, allow them to do things that um, they maybe couldn't do either in other settings. Maybe fly to Europe and make a painting and bring it back with them. Uh, that 50 years ago would be wet for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It might be, there. I think that that everything is always so much in flux uh, that had I known, I mean, yeah, and honestly, to be perfectly honest with you, if you told me everything you just told me now when I was 20 years old, it would have probably gone in one ear and out the other, and I
Mm-hmm.
would have said, well, I'll figure all that out.
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess I have in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And, now I think that while, as you very accurately pointed out, there are a lot of drawbacks to sculpture and a lot of things that make it a difficult thing to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of those things are actually make it give you an advantage in relation to painting or other fields. There are relatively few people who do it really well,
Right.
in comparison to the number of painters who are phenomenally good. And I think partially that's because it does present a lot of challenges up front. So if you get good at it, you do have more opportunities
Mm-hmm.
than the equivalent painter might have.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, the reason that I ask is because I'm curious about why you specifically like the medium and why you have
Hmm.
stuck with it the entire time in spite of that. Um, because I have made the same decision except with drawing, in spite
Hmm.
of any drawbacks that drawing might have. Because, like you were saying, it is completely irrelevant. Like, I don't care. I don't care.
Hmm.
And like you obviously don't care either, because otherwise you would not be doing sculpture. So then I'm curious about what is it that calls your attention about sculpture, and what is it that has made you stick with sculpture. So like, so like that is the question. Like, it's about you specifically. Like, like I'm not trying
Yeah.
to make anyone not choose sculpture.
Yeah, no, I understand. I don't know that I agree um, that I don't care. Like, I do care that it's difficult, and it does give me pause every time I run into, a real problem that I see my friends who are in other, you know, work in other mediums don't have to deal with. Like, I don't sort of say, like, screw it, I'm a sculptor, and that's, I don't care if people don't like that it's more difficult to sell, that it's more difficult to store. Like, I do care all about all of those things, and my whole career I've been dealing in one way or another with how I feel about that, what I can do about it, how can I make it more accessible, both financially. In sort of recent years, I've had to deal with, not had to deal, but I've been sort of, I guess, more aware of the limit uh, that the financial kind of burden sculpture places not only on me, but on people who want to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what can I do in the process that I'm going through to make sculpture? What can I do to make it more accessible so that it's not, $50,000, and if you can't afford it, too bad. You can look at it on Instagram. Um, and all of that, I think, uh, once you get beyond kind of learning the mechanics of like how to use the material and how to make things that you find interesting and that hopefully other people find interesting, there are all of those practical issues that I think um, initially maybe are impediments to overcome, and ultimately become challenges uh, that engage you in the same way that I'm sure when you began drawing, it was the challenge of doing it that is engaging. It's you and your charcoal or your pencil and the thing in front of you. And your challenge is to somehow capture certain elements of what's in front of you and recreate that on a two-dimensional surface. And when that works, there's no better feeling. It feels like you're kind of creating a certain magic. Um, when it doesn't, there's nothing more frustrating. And then as that becomes less of a sort of existential challenge, as you learn to more um, reliably be able to sit down in front of an object and, not know that it'll be the best thing that you've ever created, but not praying that it will resemble what's in front of you. Once you become more adept at doing that, then you begin to branch out into other, maybe other drawing media and see what potential they can offer, and other scale. What about a large scale drawing versus small? You start to like open up those challenges for yourself. And I think that's what's happened to me over my career. At
Mm-hmm.
first, if I could make something look human, I was thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
And then as that became, not as much of a challenge, then I started sort of setting new challenges. And now some of the limitations that the material imposes become a challenge. And how can you work with them? How can you overcome them? Which ones are just essential to the act of making three-dimensional work, and which ones are imposed on us, like everything has to be cast in bronze, this super expensive material that is incredibly difficult to work with but will last for thousands of years. Like, is that really a requirement? So all of those, I think, become those challenges that engage you and engage like how you think about what you do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes
Um,
sense or if that answers the question.
yes. What are when you talk about the limitations of, I guess, clay you're talking about?
Well, I mean, sculpture in any media, clay, marble, bronze, um,
Okay, so then
it
what
could
would you
be.
Okay, so then what would you say are the limitations of the material that you use to make sculpture?
So primarily over the last 20 or so years, I've used a lot of bronze. I've used some cement. I've used some resins. I've used plaster. I've used clay, both water-based and oil-based. And I think that each one has different limitations. I think that clay, um, one of its main limitations is longevity. You can make it, and you can make it do, a huge variety of things, but ultimately, if you punch it, your fist is going to leave an impression. And if you want to ship it, it's incredibly delicate and very fragile. Water-based clay or terracotta has like a beautiful inherent beauty, but it has a very limited amount of um, attenuation that you can make to the forms that have any amount of rigidity. So if I want to stick an arm way out into space, that's most likely to break if I do
Mm.
anything other, lightly touch it. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to ship it or do things like that. But there's an inherent beauty to that material that's really, there are very few things that can match it.
Mm-hmm.
Bronze has exactly the opposite. You can have something 5 feet long sticking straight out into space, and you can have a 7-year-old hang off of the end of that, and you won't have any problem with it breaking. But bronze has an inherently it's metal, and metal, especially the kind of work that I make, which generally is trying to evoke flesh. In a lot of ways, metal is the opposite of flesh. That metal's reflective. Metal is cold. Metal is, has like all of the qualities that I'm trying to create the illusion that the material that I'm using doesn't have. And so whenever I work in bronze, I'm fighting the bronze and fighting the inherent qualities of the material to make the work that I create feel as if it's not metallic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sometimes I prefer that material because, in terms of format, it allows me to do things that I wouldn't be able to do in other media.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that just means I'm a sort of inherent contrarian. Whatever you tell me I should do, I try and do the opposite. I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't make soft, fleshy things out of metal, and I try and do that. And I shouldn't, uh, I shouldn't make things that are really long and attenuated out of a fragile material, and I'll try and do that. I have a very difficult time sort of sticking to the traditional like way things should be done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so Mr. Simon, what is art?
Oh gosh. Um,
I told
that's
you.
a hard. Yeah, you did. You told me, and then you asked me a bunch of other questions and didn't let me think about that. Art, I think, is such a difficult term and one that I have like a very uncomfortable relationship with. I don't like to call myself an artist. I like to call myself a sculptor. I think it's very um, straightforward to call yourself a draftsman or a painter or a sculptor or a printmaker or a singer or a writer because that's what you do. You do those activities. Making art, for me, is a subjective um, uh, label or categorization that's best left to people looking at whatever the work is. I mean, for certain people, what I make is art, and for some certain people, it's a portrait or a figure or a sculpture. Um, Obviously, I have my own feelings when I look at other people's work about what I think um, resonates with it, whether I think it's a painting or whether I think it sort of surpasses the thing itself. And maybe that's as um, viable a definition. It's something in the field of creative endeavor that surpasses the essence of the activity that went into creating it and exists in a sort of a plane beyond that. So I think there are paintings that are paintings, and then there are paintings that are art, and there are songs that are songs, and there are songs that have become art. And there's sculpture that's sculpture, and there's sculpture that becomes art. And I think although generally we are all um, have the ambition to create art, I think from a practical point of view, what we're actually all doing is creating the thing we're creating. I'm making a portrait or I'm making a figure. I'm making a sculpture. And then it's up to time, it's up to other people's response to it uh, to categorize it as something that goes beyond that. Um, in terms of what art is societally, obviously that's something that changes fairly radically through time. I think a lot of what we view from the Renaissance or from, ancient Rome or ancient Greece as art, nowadays would be viewed as commerce. It was, this portrait of an emperor was, in some ways equivalent to the photograph that they put up of the president of the United States in a post office. It was there to show people a physical representation of the person who's leading them. And now, 2,000 years later, we look at this completely differently. We look to its aesthetic qualities. And at the time, the aesthetic qualities were secondary to its function in the society. I think a lot of early Renaissance painting was there to tell the story of the Bible to people who didn't know how to read. And the aesthetic quality of those were secondary to the clarity and the sort of the ability of those let's say, Giotto paintings to clearly tell the story to all these sort of people who were going to church who couldn't read the Bibles that were there. Um, and now, like, painting has a completely different function than it did then. And I think that function has changed more rapidly in the last 100 years than it's probably changed in the 2000 years previous to that. I think that sort of with the evolution of society and technology, what once, like relatively recently was, portraiture was intended to um, create images of people's families that they could have and hold on to through as their family members aged and died. And photography, supplanted that function, and suddenly portraiture had completely different functions. And that's like not more than 100 years old. And so it's very difficult for me, like from a societal level, to pinpoint like what does a drawing of a person mean today as as an artifact, as how does it function in society. And so I guess my response to that is first and foremost to say it should function well as a drawing. It should function well as this two-dimensional, uh, non-color based representation on paper. And then there may be attributes to it that make it go beyond functioning well as a drawing. Um, and I think once you start to formalize that and put it into some sort of canon that you can define, you take a lot of the magic out of what art is and can be.
Mm-hmm.
If I could tell you if these seven things are present in a drawing, then it's art. Then what do you call those drawings that rise beyond those seven things? Then we start to need new words to describe that like magical quality that a piece that doesn't have a practical function in today's society can evoke.
Mm-hmm.
There are movies that you go to and you want a thrill ride, and they provide that, and you leave satisfied. And there are movies that you go to and you leave completely changed. The way you see the world is changed. And to me, those movies are art. And if there was a way of sort of codifying that, they wouldn't be that special. It wouldn't be such a rare experience to go and see that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question in a satisfying way, but
Sure. But I mean, I don't think that necessarily precludes asking what makes something not just a work of art, but like you were saying, and I mean, I like the distinction between painting and art, in the sense that there's paintings that, like you were saying, there's paintings that are just paintings versus paintings that are art. So then, and I mean, I used to think when I was younger that trying to explain something or trying to talk about my work, for example, would somehow remove the mystery or the wonder from it.
Mhm.
And I have since kind of noticed also the fact that I was just copping out, that I was, because I didn't want to try to explain something or just to think about something or try to just be clear or accurate about something that I was trying to convey, not just with the image, but also verbally, like try to talk about the idea as well. And I mean, I don't think that visual art needs that in order for it to be good or whatever, but I do like the mental effort required because, of course, it's more difficult to try to decipher that, right? It's way more
Mhm.
difficult to try to divine that information. So then, for example, if
Mhm.
you think of like a handful or whatever images, whatever paintings or sculptures or whatever that you consider to be kind of like the magical version of a painting
Mhm.
or drawing or sculpture, what do you see that they have in common that make those art? Because I mean, I like, again, I like that distinction, and I agree with it in the sense that there's lots of paintings that are considered to be very good, like in the history books and stuff, and I look at them and I'm just like not I don't like, I'm not super impressed or anything, even though I can
Hmm.
see they're well made and whatever, they're very ambitious and this type of stuff, but I'm not impressed by it. Like I don't want to spend time with the thing. I don't want to contemplate it. Versus something
Hmm.
that is also well made, but I do want to invest time with it, and I do want to contemplate it, and I do want to understand what information it's trying to give me, this type of stuff. So like,
Hmm.
what is what is the difference
Yeah.
between the two? What kind of things, what commonalities is there in the things that you like that make them art?
Well, I mean, I guess um, the best way I could describe it would be to make a parallel between love, right? Tell me, you can tell me all the qualities that you like in a person that you appreciate and value, and I can give you a person that has all of those qualities, and you may not love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give you another person who's missing half of those qualities, and you may fall completely in love with them.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a way for you to explain beforehand what will make you fall in love? I don't think so. I don't think that that is something that we have access to. There's a magical sort of connection between certain qualities in a certain environment in a certain package that connects for you. And I don't necessarily think, like you live a certain amount of time and you've fallen in love when you were young and fallen out of love and fallen in love with again. But maybe those people are completely different from one another. And there's something about that weird combination that just clicked for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the minute you try and be reductive and say, like, okay, let's be analytical about this and take the four people I've been in love with and make a spreadsheet that lists all their qualities. And then out of that, I should be able to make a definition of what love is for me in a way that I will be able to reproduce in a dating app and I will reliably be able to find love. And I just don't know that that exists or can exist. And I think that for me, um, the condition that I try now to go into making artwork, um, or to be more consistent, to make when I make sculpture, I try and be open. I try and be very open to those feelings that I have when things click together for me. And I think there are times when I've made things that I feel are a little bit transcendent of the other things I've made that go beyond sort of the technically sort of well made, the maybe interesting connections that I've made, and begin to have a life of their own. And what is love if not that? Like, you maybe date a bunch of people and you go out on dates, and those dates are dinners or movies or outings to a museum or whatever they are. And then you meet someone, you go out with them, and that sort of time together goes beyond the movie or the dinner or whatever it was. And you just think of that, of being with that person, and that, you know, that sort of time together transcends whatever the experience itself was. And I think, it's very helpful to be open to that. It can be, you can close yourself off to that and miss it when it has the potential to happen. And I think that's also true in making drawings or paintings or sculpture, when you're too sort of closed off and looking at, okay, does it include all of these qualities that I've defined as being crucial? I think there are times when you can miss that something, you know, unusual is happening in a piece that you're working on. Um, and it's why I think that making representational work is so difficult. In many ways, in my opinion, so much more difficult than non-representational, whether it's abstract or non-objective work. Because when you're making non-objective or abstract work, there are so many fewer technical elements that are competing for um, your attention, that it's easier to be open to seeing relationships and feelings. And when you are thinking about proportion and composition and anatomy and all of these things, that kind of sensitivity to what in those ineffable things that are happening can be like suppressed a little bit. You say like, well, no, that's not correct. That element is not correct, and I've got to get rid of that. And sometimes, I mean, they're very, very often it happens that the pieces that are most resonant for me, when I look at them from a purely technical perspective, I can find, quote unquote errors. Like, okay, proportionally, the head of the David's a little bit on the large side. Like there are these elements that if you want to be sort of very, very true to the training that you had, don't match perfectly. But somehow you walk into a room with these pieces and they overwhelm you in some difficult to define way. Um, and I think that being open to that while you're working can be challenging, especially early on in your career when you really are struggling to kind of really get control of all of those technical elements and feel like you are mastering your craft. Um, and so I think that more so than trying to define what art is, I try my best to look at a lot of artwork, to look at
Mm-hmm.
painting, look at sculpture, looking drawing, and try and respond and as I get older, kind of recalibrate the things that like really hit me. And there are definitely pieces that I loved when I was younger that I come back to 20 years later and I can see what I was attracted to, but they don't resonate the same way for me now. And other pieces that resonated with me then that still resonate with me now. And and some pieces that I never kind of loved, but now really there's something in them that is so kind of fascinating to me. Almost the way maybe you took your grandparents for granted, and then as you get older and they get older, suddenly you realize how much they have to offer. Um, so I know maybe that's not as analytical or as kind of a nailed down response as what you were asking me for. Um, but I think in a certain way, uh, for me, art with a capital A has that quality of always wriggling out of that definition. Just like when you try and like put your finger on it, it's sort of shifted to the left, and you say like, "Oh, yeah, that too. That also is art for me." And then you're starting to redefine, and then that new definition misses some other thing that you kind of really respond to. And in the end, your your definition can become so broad as to be useless because it includes everything, or you know so narrow that it misses all these things that you do really have an affinity or an affection for but can't really seem to fit. um, and it's a hugely complicated issue in the same way that I find teaching sculpture is. Like, you have to be good and have in your mind so many things all at the same time and constantly shifting your attention between them. And anytime you focus on one of them too much, the others have a tendency to get away from you. When you focus too much on proportion, your anatomy starts to sort of get a little bit weird. Once you start focusing on your anatomy, it starts to grow and hurt your proportions. Once you kind of have those under control, then maybe the rhythms in your piece become a little stiff because you're so focused on proportion and anatomy. Um, and particularly with sculpture, you're dealing with every view all at once. And if one view is really working, then you turn and you say, oh my God, this other view looks terrible. And then as you change that one, now the first one, all the things you had going well are not working. So you're constantly shifting back and forth. And I think as an artist, and not just in the technical or the sort of ineffable or artistic um, evaluation, but in your taxes, in your business practices, in your friendships, in the way you set up your life, you're always trying to like shift back and forth between how do I keep my entire crazy life as an artist moving forward. Like for you, you've got a podcast and you make drawings and you presumably have, friends and family and, bills and desires beyond your art making and desires within your art making. And that's constantly, you know, you shifting your attention from one to the other to try and like keep them all moving around or keep them all moving forward. And then as you go, some start to get away from you, and then you switch your attention to those. Others start to get away from you. And for me, my whole life has been, just sort of juggling all these things and hopefully keeping them all moving forward. But it's, you know, with all the difficulty, it's super exciting. It makes life, constantly interesting and and constantly feels like there are opportunities that you could take advantage of. But also, it's constantly challenging not to feel like everything is getting away from you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Simon, what is beauty?
Oh gosh, they don't get any easier, do they? What is beauty? Um, I think that in a lot of ways, beauty is, is very similar to art. It is something that has like a deep resonance with you when you experience it. Like if we're talking about beauty in the deep sense, not in the physical or the sort of classical sense. There's beautiful music, there's beauty in sort of looking at a landscape and how everything sort of fits together. There's beauty in mathematical order when things, when you put like, I've got a 14-year-old daughter who up until last year let me help her with her math homework. And I that was probably my worst subject in school, but returning to it after all these years without having to worry about at least myself getting a grade in it, I did find like a real beauty when I would work through a complicated problem with her and reach the correct solution. I just thought like, oh, we went through these 80 different steps and I was not certain until the end how they all came together. And when they did, there's this like beautiful kind of precision to it. I think there's some sort of like internal sense of order that underlies beauty. And I think that in its expression, it can vary. Like there are all kinds of people I find incredibly beautiful, from
Sure.
the classically beautiful to like a very, very unusual looking people. But when those sort of features fit together in a particular way that starts to make sense to my, weird brain, I find like a real sense of joy in that. And it's one of the reasons I love making portraits is like making portraits is like a very elaborate three-dimensional visual math problem where all of the different elements of someone's face need to be understood to a certain extent, where you can fit them together and create harmony among these like disparate elements. And when that comes together, no matter what they look like, there's this overwhelming sense of beauty that I find in front of me. And it's like so fascinating because I very often find myself to be a very poor judge of beauty at the outset. Like I'll look at someone and say like, I don't know if I want to make a portrait of them. I don't find them very particularly, beautiful or interesting. And then I'll start like, for one reason or the other, they're the only model available, or I'm being paid to make a portrait of this person. Um, I start to like really analyze and see like, okay, what makes that nostril sort of, fit into the side of the nose, and how does the form from the side of the nose sort of rotate around? And suddenly this person I had no real affinity for physically, I began to see like enormous beauty in how their their forms express themselves. And that's one of the kind of the element, and out of that I can have like an incredibly moving and powerful experience. And sometimes I step back and other people don't have that experience with that particular work. They think like, okay, that's fine. It looks like the person, but it doesn't grab them. And other times they are like very, very kind of drawn to that particular thing. And sometimes I'm not a particularly great judge of what other people will be drawn to. Um, and I'm not particularly a great judge of what I will be drawn to in that process. Again, like sometimes I go into it thinking that it won't be revelatory, and I do really have this transformative experience. And that is what makes the doing of sculpture or drawing or painting for me like so engaging. That potential every time to have that sort of transformational experience in the working of it. Right? Some people want the result.
Mm-hmm.
I am sort of see the result, especially now. I can bring you into my studio and show you like hundreds of sculptures lined up on shelves. And if someone wants to buy one, that's obviously financially great. But for me, those are sort of records of encounters that I've had with the experience. And for me, that's what's so valuable about it.
Mm-hmm. Um, do you think that the variability of what one person, I mean, like in your case, like you were saying, the variability of what you can find beautiful, do you think that means that maybe beauty is not in what we see and it's rather something else?
I mean, I guess I don't think beauty is only visual,
Right,
right? I talked about mathematical beauty and
right.
musical beauty. So I certainly think that physical or visual beauty is one type of beauty. But I think underlying all of beauty is pattern. I think there's something about the pattern of musical notes or numbers or physical forms or like different elements. I think that's what sort of our minds perceive as beauty. And that can be sort of eyes, nose, mouth arranged in a very specific way. You know, Physical, bodily attributes arranged in certain kinds of patterns. I think if someone sort of forced me to take a guess at what underlies beauty, I would probably guess that it would be pattern, some sort of pattern recognition that in certain sort of arrangements we naturally perceive as beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But again, I think there are definitions which are interesting to ponder, but as sculptors and painters and draftsmen, I think are we maybe do ourselves a disservice to try too rigidly to define these these elements, like what is art, what is beauty. I think that the point of your career as a visual person is to explore that question. And if you know the answer to the question at the beginning, your exploration is not really exploration. It's just sort of, regurgitation of that formula again and again. I think, one of the most fulfilling parts of being a sculptor for me is that discovery of new versions of beauty and art in the things that I make as I kind of move along through my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's I don't think it's a disservice at all. I mean, for me, what I'm personally trying to do with the podcast and by asking the question is trying to find what it means, what it's supposed to mean, because I personally don't think that it makes any sense that art is whatever the person says it is. I don't think that if I declare any object in this room as art, I don't think that makes the object art. Like, I don't agree with that at all, and it makes no sense to me that, and I don't like that the concept of art has become so dissolved that it means nothing. So I don't like that, and that is why I'm trying to look for that information. Maybe doing it by talking to people is not a very straightforward route to do so. But I mean, also with beauty, it's like I don't think that it's necessarily like something that can't be pinpointed down. I just think that it's very difficult to try to talk about it in a way that will make sense in terms of what it actually is. Because it's like, I agree with you, it's like with what you said with art, it's like a work of art doesn't strictly have to kind of cover a list, check all of the items on a list, and then it's a good work of art. I'm aware that's not how art or beauty works. Because, for example, like when you were talking about I think it was still art, or I don't remember what it was, but for example, if I say I love men with beards, that's obviously a lie. Okay, because there are plenty of men with beards that I am obviously going to be repulsed by. So then it's obviously not the characteristic of he has a beard, I'm going to be in love with him. That's not how that works. So then love or even physical attraction are clearly not that simple. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have some kind of a accurate explanation for what the circumstances of attraction, love, beauty, art are. So then I'm just trying to do something here,
No, I don't, like, I'm not trying to imply that sort of pursuing that idea and trying to figure something out that points toward that is not a valuable pursuit. I'm just saying that, like, in the same way that in the end it may be impossible to define love in a way that allows you to predict beforehand what two people will fall in love or not, it may be impossible to sort of define art in a way that will allow you to reliably produce it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I think the analogy of love is a really good one because, so it might work with art as well. Like, I didn't know that I was in love until I was in love. Okay, so that has only happened once, and it's with my husband. Okay, and so, like, I think one of the reasons for that, and like in the case of love specifically, for example, is that it is confused with other things. It's confused with lust, it's confused with infatuation, it's confused with kind of like that rush of the novelty when you are first with someone that you're very physically attracted to, for example, right? So then it takes experiencing being actually in love, like the meaningful thing that happens when you want to be with somebody just forever, to know that those other things, to know that this thing is love and the other things were not. You see what I'm saying? So I think there's something like that. And I mean, not that the description of wanting to be with somebody forever is necessarily, like you were saying, like the item that is checked, because one, of course, it's like the stereotype of when you're like 15 and you're like with your little crush, you're like, I want to be with you forever, and it's like, no, you fucking don't. You're not going to be with them forever. It's not going to happen. You see what I'm saying? So like, I get it. It's just an example of like kind of having experienced the thing will allow then that thing to be differentiated from the other things. So then I think there's something of the sort with both art and beauty.
Yeah, and in the same way that when you're 15 and you think you're in love, you can be 30 and think you're in love.
Sure.
And then maybe at 50 you realize, oh, that wasn't love. And then you meet someone else and maybe you think that's love. And maybe each one of those was love for that time and for you at that point. Um, and I think the same can be true of art. I think you can, things can be art for you and hold that like very, very special place um, in your sort of creative brain. And then you can look at the same piece 20 years later and still have an affection for it, in the same way that I would imagine the boy that you were infatuated with at 15, you look back fondly. You don't, think like, oh, he was terrible. I was innocent and he was cute. And, I understand why I thought that at the time. Um, but now I'm a different person and now, this is my reality. And I think that can be true for art as well. I don't mean to imply in any way that art is anything that you say it is, because love is not that either. Like, you don't love anyone that you point to and say, that, I want to love that. Like, love, there is a reality to it. Like, that 15-year-old you and that, however old that 15-year-old like infatuation was, like, there was some feeling there. That was not just a random, like,
Sure.
you spun around and pointed at someone. There's something, uh, a conglomeration of elements that I think need to be present for you to feel a certain attraction to an object, a painting, a sculpture, a drawing, a building, a song, a movie. There has to be sort of certain qualities to it. Um, what make that thing special for you and stand out from all of the other examples that also have those qualities, I think are very difficult to define and probably are going to change for you in different phases of your life, depending on sort of what is important to you. As you get older, as you get closer, to death, maybe those elements become more sort of poignant for you in a work of art that make things feel more resonant than when you were 20 and you were much further away from that sort of eventuality. Um, so I think that things change for us throughout our lives, and what we turn to for mm, explanation of meaning. And I think, you could maybe say that a quality of art is that it does have that quality of explaining some meaning of life to you in a way that's resonant for the point that you are in your life. It helps you wrestle with like the reality of existence, and that, like, when we're at different points in our life, we have different sort of, crushing fears. Like, at a certain point, you get to the point where your parents are like quite old and you begin to worry about losing them,
Mm-hmm.
and start to look at movies and read books and listen to music and do things that sort of maybe help you sort of understand that on a really deep and profound level. And works of art, I think, are ones that can sort of speak to that at a level beyond just telling you a story that has that as an element of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's very satisfying, but I tend to think that, the more I try and sort of box in art, the more it wants to escape that box and say, yeah, but what about this? This is something very profound. Um, and I guess getting older, the more I go through different periods in my life and I see different, you know, really, really burning desires of, like, I was a very, very ambitious young person, and I really wanted to be the best. That was my goal. I thought, if I'm not going to be the best sculptor, what's the point? Like, I should go to law school and make a lot of money, and at least I'll, have nice things. My goal was to be the best. And then, I got to a certain point in my life and I realized, like, you're never going to be the best. Like, there have been people doing what I'm doing for, more than 2,500 years. There are people who are better than I am that died 500 years ago. The point is not being the best. The point is having something to say with what you're doing that can be meaningful to you and to other people. And in that way, you can be incredibly valuable. Like I used to like to rank artists and say, well, this artist's better than this one. This one's a little worse than this one. And now I just think that, Rembrandt is not better than Vermeer. They're different. And if one tried to do what the other did so well, they'd both be the worse off for it. Um, Being great at everything is not possible. Um, the goal is not sort of that kind of ranking, like who's better than who. Um, wouldn't it be a terrible world if we could find the best artist and just get rid of all the others? Because once you have the best, why? Like, if I have the best ice cream, I don't really need the second best ice cream. I'm pretty good with the best ice cream. Like, but that's not true with music. I don't only want the best song and you can get rid of all the other songs. I don't only want, like, I would be pretty happy if we had, like, figured out the best way to teach children and then everybody used that way, right? And all children learned really effectively. I think with creative things, that's not really the case. I think that each one of those different ways of seeing the world adds something to it. And within each one of those, yes, there's a ranking. There are people who are much worse at those quiet Dutch interiors than Vermeer was. But to pit Vermeer against Raphael is silly. I wouldn't want to get rid of either one of them. To pit Bouguereau against Sargent, like, I wouldn't want to sacrifice either one of those. So the ranking, as I get older, I don't think anymore that for myself, that I want to sort of climb some imaginary ladder that I've created so that I can get to the top of it. I just want to be as sort of go as far in the things that I pursue as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think that's great particularly that last phrase is pretty great as a closure, as a starting to close the episode, Mr. Simon. So, do you want to add anything? Where can people find your work? Do you have any shows or classes coming up that you'd like to talk about?
So, like, most of my work now, like, most immediately goes to Instagram. Um, So, like, if you want to see work in progress and things like that, that's all generally there. I do have a website where I list all of my workshops and exhibitions and classes and things like that, uh, commission process if people want to commission portraits and things like that. This coming year, I'm sort of dropping everything and moving to Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting.
I'll bet.
I've been grinding for 30 years, more or less, sort of on the same treadmill, and now I'm gonna spend a year just trying to, like, go back to the beginning of why I make what I make and how I make it, and not, I have like a theory, like a quantum theory of my career, in that the observation of it affects the actual thing. I may think I'm doing something, but as I look at it and sort of observe it, it changes it. So having classes and teaching the process that I sort of lay out for students, I think can't help but affect what I do when I'm by myself in the studio. And I'm curious to, like, if I remove that, if I'm not teaching every week, will that open up my process in the studio? Will I be as rigid, just so I don't feel hypocritical when I tell students to measure everything? What if I'm not measuring everything? Just sort of like getting back to a little bit of an earlier version of my relationship with making sculpture. And the food and the coffee and the
Of course.
inspiration can't hurt.
Of course.
So I don't have any exhibitions planned for this year. I've been teaching workshops in Italy every year for the last 12 years. So I'm going to do that again this summer and next summer. But in between, sort of, I'm planning a little bit of a break.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well. All right. So, good luck with that, Simon. I think you're Mr. Simon. I think you're going to enjoy that greatly, or I hope you do at least. So, thank you very much, David, for talking with me today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to support David and my podcast, you can do so through the links in the video description. So please make sure to check those out. And this is it for today, everyone. So thank you again, and goodbye until the next episode.